Welcome to Tilting at Tomes, a special episode on literary hauntings. We'll discuss 3 books on ghosts for your spooky pleasures. To put us in the mood, I brought a camera briefly outside, and we're going to take in the beautiful autumn foliage. I just wanted to show you my trip on a beautiful autumn day. The birds are singing. What is this? I didn't do that. Well, birds are singing. It's a beautiful autumn day. Oh my gosh, what is going on with this footage? What is that? Let's just get into books.
I am here.
So I'm not sure what happened to the footage. My apologies, but let's go ahead and take a look at the books. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. Our first novel is The Reformatory. She wrote this book as an inspiration from a real-life family member who was confined and died at a reformatory school for boys. So let's take a look.
Did you tell them how many pages were in the book?
So the book reaches almost 600 pages, which is a long one, but its pacing makes it feel like a shorter novel. The story actually begins by introducing readers to a brother and sister whose mother has died and whose father has been driven up north after accusations from the white farmer community and just the justice system in general. So let's go over the characters first. And there are just a few that I want to mention here. So the characters include, first and foremost, Robbie Stevens Jr. He's a 12-year-old boy who is sent to Gracetown Reformatory School for boys. And he's wrongly accused of assaulting a well-connected white farmer's son. After that, there's Gloria Stevens. She is Robbie's older sister, and she receives, I would say, probably about a third of the other part of the narration. It follows her attempts to navigate the legal system on the outside while Robbie is on the inside. The main antagonists of the novel are one, Warden Haddock, and also Boone. We are introduced to Haddock when Robert first arrives at the reformatory. As Robert looks over the warden's office, he sees several mysterious and suspicious items that hint at the warden's ill intent for the boys. Most of the novel, I'd say, takes place at the Gracetown School for Boys. And this school is in Florida in 1950. The institution is modeled on the real historical place, the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys. And if that sounds familiar to anyone, it should be. That is, if you've read Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. It was also featured in that as well. So it's a pretty famous site. The Dozier location also had a place called Boot Hill Burial Ground. In about 2011, this was searched by investigators. They found an estimated 50 burials. An NPR article, and it was from 2012, noted that 81 documented boys were actually buried at Boot Hill. Others are still missing, so the count is possibly even higher than that. The fictional Gracetown Reformatory in the novel, it's represented as this hot, muggy, and corrupt and dirty place. The boys, they let us know, are regularly beaten with leather straps. In fact, Warden Haddon has a leather strap that seems to be this prize up in his office. They're also sent to this place called the Funhouse. So as a device, the reformatory serves several functions for the horror part of the story. the ghost story. Most important among them is the confinement of the young protagonist, Robert. And despite the dangers from the staff and the nightly visits from the ghosts, Robert can't escape, even though he actually really wants to. And so the threats to Robert take on expectations of inevitability. Ghosts are probably going to get him, you think. Stephen's time in the Reformatory mirrors Gloria's exploits on the outside. So she attempts to get Robert's release. There's always this threat from racism and bodily harm. They're never far from the mind. So despite living free on the outside, her everyday life shows its own forms of confinement. And you wonder if, even if Robert does get free, what sort of freedom, what quality of freedom will he actually have? So neither sibling can escape from danger, whether they're on the inside or the outside. Another theme that popped up, the Reformatory's spectral inhabitants are not just a means of frightening other characters. They're actually a vehicle through which Dew herself shows the history of Jim Crow's violent past. And we get a sense that these ghosts are an archive.
But what about the ghosts? Tell them about the ghosts.
The ghosts, or as they're called in the book, haints, appear in ethereal forms outside windows, hovering over children's beds, and in the dark corners of the kitchen. The variety of violent wounds borne by these ghostly inhabitants suggests actually a certain level and history of racially motivated killings, injuries, all of those things, beyond the scope of just this fire that they mention very early on. In fact, near the beginning of the book. Thus, the ghosts are not only frightful, but they serve as the Reformatory's disembodied historical archive. The author, she definitely has some chops. So there is quality writing to this. In fact, I had difficulty putting the book down. Her chapter sizes and episodic structure really keep the pace moving. Things never really move too quickly. The pacing is it's nice actually throughout. It's very even. As a literary scholar myself, I particularly loved Dew's ability to convey history and wrap important messages in this popular structure. It also speaks to her abilities to craft metaphor. She demonstrates the power of books to teach important social and cultural concepts that we might not otherwise hear. Honestly, how many of us have heard about the Dozier School that's represented by the Gracetown School in here? So for a full review, I am very soon going to put up a review on my Instagram page, which you can find linked in the description. Next up, another haunting metaphor about contemporary life in America. Model Home was written by River Solomon and published in 2024.
I reorganized your library in reverse alphabetical order.
So the characters of this book are the estranged Maxwell sisters, and they're called back to the family home, which is settled in an all-white gated community in Texas. They go back there to settle the latest tragic chapter in their collective history. But what has called them back? Most of the narrative is told through the oldest sister's perspective. Her name is Esri. She is non-binary and neurodivergent. So her upbringing under a strict mother and in unforgiving circumstances in this conservative suburban Texas community were understandably traumatic for her. But it was made all the more worse by her family's haunted house. a house that her well-to-do father and mother refused to relinquish despite its many abuses. The sisters, Eve and Emmanuel, are Esri's two younger sisters. The middle child is Eve. She's described as the responsible one. Emmanuel is called the baby, and she's the most emotional sister. She's also an influencer. That characterizes her perhaps a little bit.
I mixed some popular romance in with your literary fiction.
Esri mentions this several times during the book. The house is yet another character. At times, it seems to take on a life and personality of its own. And I can tell you, none of it is good. So the chronology jumps back and forth between the sisters' childhood and their adulthood as they deal with the book's central tragedy. The flashbacks give readers a chance to understand the circumstances that brought this sister family to the pivotal events that are in the novel. And it provides some background of the sisters' adulthood exodus from the community before they again arrived at this house. Curiously, the sisters' parents have remained in the house into their adulthood, which raises another important theme in the book. As I read, I was struck by all the characters' complacency in this, despite the hauntings. While some horrendous events happened, safety and sanity was never really a highest priority. Fitting in was way more important, but that seems to be the story's central theme. To be sure, the characters react to model homes' big bads, but they quickly bounce back into routine and worry about the outside world's perceptions of themselves, which seems to be a disconnect with the serious of the narrative going on. Next, the main character, Esri, is an outsider, but people tolerate her. And by tolerate, I mean that as awkward as it sounds. While tolerate is often assumed to be a virtue in polite society, and certainly the polite suburban Texas society, it often communicates a deeper sense of unspoken disapproval and condescension from those who wear it as a mantle. Every sweetie, every poor Esri contributes to her deepened sense of non-belonging in both the family and also the community at large. Her and the family's isolation make them more vulnerable to the house's assaults. Solomon's novel has a consistent suspense and uneasiness throughout it, and it does not always come from the ghosts themselves. Her emphasis on the outsider actively prompts discomfort. And in multiple scenes, the sense of tension comes more from the horror of how the characters feel about themselves. But that's the point. The ghosts offer the Maxwell family two things. One, they're a terrifying distraction from themselves. And two, they also offer or present extremes of their own social and psychological states. The book has some truly well-crafted ghostly moments, but is more often than not an exploration of the Maxwell family's unwinding. Ooh. The third book in our haunted literary collection is The Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez. It's a short story collection with several ghost-themed selections. I read the titular story, A Sunny Place for Shady People, which is about a journalist who moves from Argentina to Los Angeles. And she becomes obsessed with a real-life woman whose name was Elisa Lamb. She became an urban legend, a real-life urban legend, after being found dead floating in a water tower above Los Angeles's Cecil Hotel. For the purposes of this video, however, I will focus on another long story in this collection, My Sad Dead, because it has more ghosts.
I combined science fiction with fantasy, and no one noticed.
The narrator of the story, and also main character, is Dr. Emma, and that's the only name that we get. She's about 60 years old, and her tone is very matter of fact. And despite, again, many of these surprising events that are happening around her, she remains relatively unaffected. To be sure, however, they do scare her, and she mentions this. Early in the book, she reveals that she can see ghosts, and she regularly wakes up to her dead mother walking the halls of the house and screaming, enough to scare anyone. To her credit, Emma notes how crazy this all sounds, but I was consistently surprised by how commonly she treated the real and supernatural violence swirling around her.
I'm reading a book behind you right now.
My Sad Dead is set in a small neighborhood in Buenos Aires. As the main character describes, her neighborhood is like a small island. On one side is an ugly river, and on the other sides, these, as she describes them, slums have sprouted up, and it's isolated her community and then brought in crime from those other areas. Her neighborhood, though, she notes, is like most places in Argentina. In an October 2025 article on PBS, they described the recent history of Argentina's economy in this way. So, in the long term, they said, government decisions made the Argentine economy more vulnerable. And recently, the current government has made the economic hardships more acute with some of their decisions. Now, in Emma's world, more crime has made more ghosts, and the neighborhood is crowded. Argentina's social collapse places a heavy burden on the neighborhood's residents. And as conditions become increasingly violent, the residents, they actually seem to become numb to it. What has merited shock and terror before for this neighborhood merits little notice or pity by the end. The story, therefore, documents the effects of this total civic collapse in Argentina through the supernatural metaphor of ghosts. I've never previously read any of Mariana Enriquez's work because, unfortunately, I fall victim to what a lot of people have. I just didn't pay enough attention to horror as a genre. Horror has been unfairly stigmatized by its often pulpy, sometimes campy origins, but Enriquez's skill with prose and satire gleefully and thankfully defy a whole history of genre expectations. I think that her writing is sharp, vivid, and incisive. So if you have any recommendations on where else to start with her work, if you're a fan of hers, please let me know in the comments section. I absolutely plan to read more of her work. I have a few honorable mentions because I was unable to complete them for this project. They include 2 books. 1, How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. 2, The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendolyn Kiste. I think that's how you pronounce her last name.
Tonight, while you sleep, I will remove all of your bookmarks.
No, you'll ruin my reading stats.
This is my GhostTube channel now. All ghost books forever.
Thank you, as always, for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe to support this channel. And happy hauntings.